I know what you're thinking. I know how this sounds. But before you judge me, before you write me off as some selfish wife who destroyed her marriage on a whim, just hear me out. I wasn't trying to ruin anything. I was trying to save it. Or at least, I thought I was. I thought I was being progressive, open-minded, evolved. I thought I was bringing a solution to problems we didn't even know we had yet. I thought polyamory could make us stronger. Instead, it made him realize he'd rather be alone than be with me. And now everyone acts like I'm the villain, like I'm the one who gave up on our marriage, like I'm the one who walked away. But he's the one who left. He's the one who chose single life over working through this with me. He's the one who decided our 6 years together weren't worth fighting for. So, yeah, maybe I suggested something unconventional. Maybe I pushed boundaries. Maybe I challenged the traditional structure of marriage in a way that made him uncomfortable. But does that make me the bad guy? Does that mean I deserve to be abandoned? I don't think so. But apparently, I'm the only one who sees it that way. It started innocently enough. It always does, right? I was scrolling through social media one night while Marcus was playing video games in the other room. That's what our evenings had become, parallel existence in the same house. Me on my phone, him on his console, occasionally asking each other if we wanted snacks or what we should watch before bed. We'd been married for 6 years, together for 8. High school sweethearts who'd done everything right, dated through college, moved in together after graduation, got engaged when we were 24, married at 25. We were the couple everyone envied, the ones who made young love look easy and sustainable. But lately, things had felt flat. Not bad exactly, just predictable, safe, boring. I'd see my single friends going on adventures, trying new things, meeting new people, and I'd feel this weird pang of something that felt uncomfortably like regret. Not regret about Marcus specifically, but regret about settling down so young, about never experiencing the wild freedom of my 20s, about choosing security over excitement. We'd become roommates more than lovers. Our sex life had dwindled to once every few weeks, and even then, it felt obligatory. We had the same conversations on repeat. We watched the same shows. We ordered from the same 3 restaurants. Our life had become a loop, comfortable and suffocating at the same time. So when I stumbled across an article about polyamorous couples who claimed their relationships were stronger because of it, I was intrigued. The article featured multiple couples who talked about how opening their relationships had brought them closer, how it had reignited their passion for each other, how it had allowed them to experience novelty while maintaining their primary partnership. One woman said, "Polyamory saved my marriage. It gave us both the freedom to explore while knowing we always had each other to come home to." Another couple talked about compersion, the joy you feel when your partner experiences joy with someone else. They made it sound so evolved, so mature, so much more enlightened than traditional monogamy, with all its restrictions and jealousies. I read that article 3 times. Then I started reading more. Blog posts, Reddit threads, entire books about ethical non-monogamy. I learned the terminology, primary partners, secondaries, metamors, hierarchical versus non-hierarchical polyamory. I watched documentaries about triads and quads, and people who'd built entire chosen families around non-traditional relationship structures. I fell into a rabbit hole. Every night after Marcus went to bed, I'd stay up scrolling through polyamory forums, reading success stories, watching YouTube videos of happy poly families, explaining how their relationships worked. I joined Facebook groups where people shared advice about handling jealousy, managing time between partners, having difficult conversations with monogamous spouses. The more I immersed myself in this world, the more monogamy started to seem restrictive, unnatural even. Why did we accept that one person had to be everything to us? Best friend, lover, co-parent, adventure buddy, intellectual companion? That seemed like an impossible burden to place on any single human being. I started noticing things about our marriage that I'd previously accepted as normal. The way Marcus and I had different interests that we pursued separately, how he loved sports and I loved art, and we'd just stopped trying to share those parts of ourselves, how we'd become experts at parallel play, existing in the same space without actually connecting. And I started thinking, what if we could each find people who shared those other interests? What if Marcus could have a partner who loved watching football with him, and I could have someone who wanted to go to gallery openings? What if instead of expecting each other to be everything, we could build a network of relationships that fulfilled different needs? It made so much sense in my head. It seemed so logical, so evolved, so much more realistic than the fairy tale of one person forever who completes you. I read about couples who'd been together for 20 years and credited polyamory with keeping their relationship fresh. About people who said jealousy was a learned emotion that could be unlearned. About families who were raising children in poly households and said the kids benefited from having more adult role models and more love in their lives. Every article, every testimonial, every success story made me more convinced that this was the answer. That this was what we needed to break out of our rut and remember why we'd fallen in love in the first place. I even started fantasizing about how it would work. Marcus would understand once I explained it properly. Maybe he'd be hesitant at first, but he'd come around. We'd set boundaries together, establish rules, move slowly. Maybe we'd start by just going on dates with other people, nothing physical at first. Or maybe we'd find another couple who wanted to explore together, make it a shared adventure. I imagined us sitting down with other poly couples, learning from their experiences, building our new relationship structure together. I imagined date nights where we'd come home and tell each other about our other partners, feeling compersion instead of jealousy, celebrating each other's joy. It would be like falling in love with Marcus all over again, but with the added excitement of new connections, new energy, new possibilities. Looking back now, I can see how delusional I was, how I'd built this entire fantasy without once considering whether Marcus wanted any of it, how I'd convinced myself that my desires were evolution while his boundaries were just conditioning. But at the time, I was certain, absolutely certain that polyamory was the answer, and the more I read, the more it made sense to me. Why should one person have to be everything to another person? Why should marriage mean cutting yourself off from the possibility of connecting with anyone else ever again? Why was monogamy treated as the default, the only legitimate way to structure a relationship? Marcus and I had been faithful to each other for 8 years. We'd never even talked about other people. But what if that faithfulness was keeping us stagnant? What if the very structure we'd committed to was the thing holding us back from growing? What if polyamory was the answer? I spent 3 weeks researching before I brought it up to Marcus. 3 weeks of reading, learning, convincing myself that this was the solution we needed. I prepared arguments, anticipated objections, crafted a whole presentation in my mind about why this could work for us. I picked a Friday night, after we'd had dinner, and a couple of glasses of wine. He was relaxed, in a good mood, laughing at something on his phone. It seemed like the perfect time. "Hey," I said, putting down my wine glass. "Can we talk about something?" He looked up, still smiling. "Sure. What's up?" "I've been thinking about our relationship," I started carefully. "About us, and where we are, and where we're going." His smile faded slightly. "Okay, that sounds serious." "It's not bad," I said quickly. "I'm not unhappy. I think we might be stuck, like we're in a rut, you know?" "I guess." He set his phone down, giving me his full attention now. "I mean, yeah, things have gotten pretty routine, but that's normal, right? That's what happens when you've been together this long." "But does it have to be?" I leaned forward, warming to my topic. What if there was a way to bring excitement back, to feel like we did when we first met, but without losing what we've built. Are you talking about, like, date nights, trying new things together? He seemed genuinely confused about where I was going with this. Kind of, but bigger than that. I took a breath. I've been reading about polyamory, about couples who open their relationships and find that it actually makes them stronger, and I think it might be something worth exploring. The silence that followed felt like it lasted an hour, though it was probably only a few seconds. Polyamory, Marcus repeated slowly. You want to see other people? Not just me, both of us, together, as a team. I was talking fast now, trying to get it all out before he could shut down. It's not about replacing you or not loving you. It's about experiencing novelty and growth while maintaining our primary partnership. Studies show that couples in ethical non-monogamous relationships often report higher satisfaction. Stop, he said quietly. Just stop. He stood up from the couch and walked to the kitchen. I heard him pour water, take a long drink. When he came back, his expression was unreadable. Let me make sure I understand this, he said, his voice carefully controlled. You want us to have an open marriage. You want to sleep with other people, and you want me to be okay with it. It's not about sleeping with other people specifically. Then what is it about? He cut me off. Explain it to me. Make it make sense. I tried. God, I tried. I talked about how we got together so young and never experienced adult singlehood, about how monogamy is a social construct that doesn't work for everyone, about how love doesn't have to be finite, how you can love multiple people in different ways, about compersion and ethical non-monogamy, and how this could bring us closer together. I talked for probably 10 minutes straight, using all the language I'd learned, all the arguments I'd prepared. Marcus just stood there, listening, his face getting harder and harder with each word. When I finally stopped, he said, Are you already sleeping with someone? What? No, of course not. Are you interested in someone specific? No, I said, though that wasn't entirely true. There was a guy at my gym who'd been friendly, who made me laugh, who I'd maybe thought about more than I should have. But I hadn't done anything about it. I'd been faithful. This isn't about anyone specific. It's about the concept, about the lifestyle. The lifestyle, he repeated, laughing bitterly. You want a lifestyle change. You want to fundamentally alter the terms of our marriage, and you're calling it a lifestyle choice. You're not hearing me. I'm hearing you perfectly, he said. You're bored. You think I'm not enough. You want permission to fuck other people. Did I miss anything? That's an incredibly reductive way to put it. Then give me a better way. He crossed his arms. Give me one reason why I should agree to this that isn't ultimately about you being unsatisfied with what we have. I opened my mouth, closed it, tried again. I think we could both benefit from... I don't want to benefit from sleeping with other people, he said flatly. I want to be with my wife, just my wife, the woman I married, the woman who apparently doesn't want to be just with me anymore. Marcus, please, you're twisting this. Am I? He grabbed his phone and keys from the counter. Because from where I'm standing, my wife just told me our entire marriage isn't enough for her, that I'm not enough for her, that she needs other people to be satisfied. Where are you going? Out, he said. I need to think. I need to not be here right now. He left, just walked out without another word, and I heard his car start up and drive away. I sat there on the couch, stunned. Part of me wanted to be angry. How dare he just leave in the middle of a conversation? How dare he not even try to understand what I was saying? But another part of me felt the first flickers of doubt. Had I really thought this through? Had I considered how this would land on someone who'd never expressed any interest in non-monogamy? I replayed the conversation in my head. The way his face had changed when I said polyamory. The way his voice had gotten quieter and more controlled as I explained. The way he'd asked if I was already sleeping with someone, as if the only explanation for this was that I'd already cheated. Maybe I should have eased into it more. Started with smaller conversations about our relationship, about feeling stuck, about wanting to try new things. Built up to the big ask instead of dropping it like a bomb. But no, I'd read that directness was important, that you had to be clear about what you wanted, that dancing around the subject only made things worse. Better to be honest, even if it was uncomfortable. Still, sitting alone in our living room, listening to the silence he'd left behind, I felt less certain than I had an hour ago. I texted him around 11. "I'm sorry if I blindsided you. Can we please talk when you get home?" He didn't respond. At midnight, he finally texted, "Staying at Jake's tonight, need space, we'll come home tomorrow." I barely slept. I kept running through all the arguments I'd make when he came back, all the ways I'd explain it better, all the reassurances I could offer. He just needed time to process. He'd been surprised, that's all. Once he had a chance to think about it rationally, to read some of the same articles I'd read, to understand that this was about growth and not about him being inadequate, he'd come around. He had to come around. Because the alternative, that I'd just destroyed my marriage with one conversation, was too horrible to contemplate. He didn't come home that night. He texted around midnight to say he was staying at his brother's place and would be back tomorrow. I barely slept, alternating between anger and anxiety, convincing myself he was overreacting, that he'd calm down and we could have a rational conversation about this. When he came home the next afternoon, he looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept either. "We need to talk," he said before I could say anything. "Okay, yes, I'm glad you're ready to. I want a divorce." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "I don't want to be in a polyamorous marriage," he said calmly. Too calmly. Like he'd practiced this. "And I don't want to be with someone who does, so I think the best solution is to end this now before it gets messier." "You're being ridiculous," I said, hearing the panic in my voice. "I suggested we talk about something and you're jumping straight to divorce. That's insane." "Is it?" He sat down on the couch looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You basically told me you want to sleep with other people, that our marriage isn't enough. How am I supposed to come back from that?" "I said we could explore it together. As a couple, it would be something we both—" "I don't want to explore it," he said, enunciating each word carefully. "I don't want an open marriage. I don't want polyamory. I don't want to watch my wife date other people and pretend I'm supposed to feel compassion about it. I want a traditional monogamous marriage. And if you don't want that anymore, then we want different things." My mind was racing, trying to find the right words, the right argument that would make him see reason. "But you're not even giving it a chance. You're not even willing to research it, to talk to other couples who've made it work, to consider the possibility." "I don't need to research it," he said. "I know myself, I know what I want, and this isn't it. So you're just giving up?" I felt tears starting. 6 years of marriage, and you're just walking away because I suggested something you don't like. "You didn't suggest trying a new restaurant," he said. "You didn't suggest taking salsa lessons or going on a trip. You suggested fundamentally changing the structure of our relationship. You suggested something that goes against everything I believe a marriage should be. But marriage is just a construct. It's not set in stone. It can be whatever we agree it should be." I was talking faster now, desperate. People redefine their relationships all the time. There's no rule book that says we have to do it the traditional way. "Maybe not," he said. "But there are expectations. Expectations that we both agreed to when we got married, forsaking all others. That was in our vows. Do you remember that part?" I did remember. I remembered standing at the altar, looking into his eyes, promising to forsake all others. I'd meant it at the time. I really had. "People change," I said quietly. "What we wanted at 25 isn't necessarily what we want at 31. We're allowed to evolve." "You're right," he said, surprising me. "People do change. And you've clearly changed. You're not the woman I married. The woman I married wanted what I wanted, a simple monogamous partnership, just the two of us against the world. I'm still that person. No, you're not, he said, but not unkindly. And that's okay. You're allowed to want different things, but I'm also allowed to not want to come along for that particular journey. But you won't even consider it. You won't even think about it. I have thought about it, he said tiredly. I thought about it all night, and I realized something. He paused and I waited, hoping he was about to say he'd reconsidered, that he was willing to try, that we could work through this. I realized that if I'm going to deal with the complications of non-monogamy, the jealousy, the scheduling, the emotional labor of managing multiple relationships, I'd rather do it as a single person than as someone's husband who's not enough for them. I stared at him. What does that mean? It means if I'm going to be poly, I'll be poly on my own terms. Not because my wife pressured me into it. He stood up. But honestly, I don't think I want that life at all. I think I want what we had. Simple, monogamous, committed. And if you don't want that anymore, then I'd rather be alone. You're punishing me, I said. You're punishing me for being honest about what I need. I'm not punishing you, he said quietly. I'm choosing myself. I'm choosing not to stay in a relationship where I'm not enough, where I have to share my wife with other people to keep her interested. That's not punishment. That's self-preservation. So single life sounds better than working on our marriage? He looked at me for a long moment. Yeah, it does. Because at least if I'm single, I'm alone by choice. Not because the person I love is looking for something I can't give them. That was 3 months ago. Marcus moved out 2 weeks after that conversation. He was efficient about it, hired movers, took his stuff, divided everything fairly. He didn't fight me on anything, didn't argue about the apartment or the furniture or any of it. He just left. The divorce papers came a month later. I didn't contest them. What was the point? He'd made his decision. My friends were divided in their reactions. Some thought Marcus overreacted, that he should have at least tried to work through it with me. Others thought I was insane for suggesting polyamory to someone I'd been monogamous with for 8 years without any warning. My sister was the harshest. You basically told your husband he wasn't enough, she said over coffee. And you're surprised he left? I didn't say he wasn't enough. I said we could explore new dimensions of our relationship. That's the same thing, she interrupted. When you tell someone you want to open the relationship, what they hear is, you're not satisfying me. There's no way to spin that positively. So I'm supposed to just suppress my needs? Pretend I don't want things I want? No, she said carefully. But you need to accept the consequences of expressing those needs. Marcus doesn't want polyamory. That's his boundary. And his boundary means you can't have both. You can't have him and non-monogamy. You have to choose. I chose him, I said. I wanted both of us to grow together. You chose the idea of him, she corrected. You chose a version of him that doesn't exist, the version that's cool with sharing you. The real Marcus, the one you actually married, doesn't want that, and instead of accepting that, you're acting like he's the one who failed. I'm not. You are, she said firmly. You've spent the last 3 weeks telling everyone who'll listen that Marcus gave up too easily, that he didn't even try, that he's close-minded and traditional, and couldn't handle your evolved approach to relationships. I opened my mouth to deny it, but she held up a hand. But here's what I see, she continued. I see a man who knew himself well enough to recognize a deal-breaker when he heard one. I see someone who respected himself enough to walk away rather than compromise on something fundamental. I see someone who valued his mental health and happiness over trying to force himself into a relationship structure he didn't want. But what about my mental health? I demanded. What about my happiness? Don't my needs matter? Of course they do, my sister said. But your needs don't trump his boundaries. You both get to have requirements for your relationship. And when those requirements don't align, the relationship ends. That's not anyone's fault. That's just incompatibility. So I'm just supposed to accept that we're incompatible after 8 years? Yes, she said simply. Sometimes people grow in different directions. Sometimes what you need changes. And sometimes that means the relationship doesn't work anymore. That's sad, but it's not a tragedy. It's just life. It feels like a tragedy, I whispered. I know it does, she said, her voice softening. But you need to stop making Marcus the villain. He's not wrong for wanting monogamy. You're not wrong for wanting polyamory. You're just wrong for each other now. Was I? Was I actually doing that? Maybe. Maybe I had spent the last 3 months telling everyone who'd listen that Marcus gave up too easily, that he didn't even try, that he threw away our marriage over one conversation. Maybe I had been painting him as the villain while I was the victim of his close-mindedness. But that's not how it felt. It felt like I'd been honest about something important, and he'd punished me for it. It felt like he'd rather blow up our entire life than even consider something outside his comfort zone. The problem was, the more people I talked to, the more I heard the same thing. That I'd blindsided him. That I'd asked for something major without laying any groundwork. That I'd essentially told him he wasn't enough and expected him to be okay with it. My mum said it. My best friend said it. My co-workers said it. The ones I was stupid enough to tell anyway. Even the poly-friendly people I'd met online said I should have approached it differently, should have started with couples therapy, should have tested the waters before jumping into the deep end. Everyone had an opinion, and most of them agreed. I'd handled this badly. But that's not how it felt. It felt like I'd been honest about something important, and he'd punished me for it. It felt like he'd rather blow up our entire life than even consider something outside his comfort zone. I tried dating after the divorce was finalized, mostly people from poly-friendly dating apps, people who were already in the lifestyle or interested in exploring it. I thought maybe that's where I belonged, with people who understood, who wouldn't judge me for wanting more than traditional monogamy offered. The first guy I went out with, Devon, was already in 2 other relationships. He talked about his primary partner and his girlfriend with such easy affection, describing how they all supported each other, how poly had enriched his life. We have this great system, he explained over drinks. Mondays and Wednesdays I'm with Sarah. Tuesdays and Thursdays with Jen. Weekends we rotate, or sometimes all hang out together. It works perfectly. I tried to imagine myself in that system, being scheduled, having designated days, sharing someone with other people who had their own designated days. That sounds organized, I said. It has to be, he laughed. Communication and scheduling are everything in poly. You can't just wing it. We went on 3 more dates. He was nice, interesting, good-looking. But every time he mentioned his other partners, I felt this weird twist in my stomach. Not quite jealousy. I had no claim on him. We'd barely started dating. But something adjacent to jealousy. Discomfort, maybe. Or the realization that I'd never be his priority. On our 4th date, he invited me to meet his primary partner. Sarah's really excited to meet you, he said. She always likes to meet my new dates early on. Make sure everyone's on the same page. I felt nothing. No spark, no interest, no desire to become another relationship in his complex web. The idea of having to get approval from someone else's primary partner, of being vetted and evaluated and slotted into their existing structure, made me want to run. I ended things after that. The second woman, Julia, was newly poly after leaving a marriage that couldn't contain her authentic self. She talked a lot about freedom and not being owned and how monogamy was patriarchal control. I wasted 10 years trying to be someone I'm not, she said on our first date. 10 years suppressing my natural desire for multiple connections because society told me I should only love one person, never again. I nodded along, recognizing my own justifications in her words. I know exactly what you mean. I was with my ex-husband for 8 years and I just felt so restricted. See, you get it. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Most people don't understand. They think polyamory is just about sex, or about being greedy, or about not being able to commit. But it's about honoring all your connections, all your attractions, all the love you have to give. We saw each other for a few weeks. It was fine, good even. Julia was smart and passionate, and we had interesting conversations about relationship structures and social conditioning. But I kept thinking about Marcus, about how he used to look at me like I was his whole world, about how we used to be enough for each other, about how when I was with him, I never felt like one of several options. I felt like the option. Julia could tell I wasn't fully present. "You're still hung up on your ex," she said one night after we'd slept together. "I can feel it." "I'm sorry," I said, because what else could I say? "Don't be sorry," she said, but she looked disappointed. "Just be honest. Are you actually poly, or are you just running from something?" I didn't have an answer. I went on maybe 10 dates over 2 months. Some went well. Some turned into brief flings. None of them felt like what I'd lost. There was Chris, who wanted kitchen table poly, where everyone hung out together. I went to a dinner party at his house, where he and his wife and his girlfriend and her boyfriend all cooked together and laughed and seemed genuinely happy. I felt like an anthropologist observing an alien culture, interested, but not part of it. There was Amanda, who was more interested in casual connections than deep relationships. "I like the freedom of poly," she said. "I can have fun with different people without any pressure. No expectations, no obligations." That's what she said she wanted anyway. But when I mentioned going on a date with someone else, I saw jealousy flicker across her face. There was Marcus, different Marcus, confusingly, who was in a closed triad with 2 other people. He was looking for a 4th. "We're not quite a quad yet," he explained, "but we're open to the right person joining our family." The idea of being auditioned to join someone else's established relationship made my skin crawl. And that's when I started to wonder, had I ever really wanted polyamory? Or had I just wanted an escape from the boredom of my marriage without having to actually end it? Had I wanted multiple partners? Or had I just wanted the option of multiple partners? The knowledge that I could if I wanted to, the freedom to not feel trapped. Had I wanted Marcus to agree to polyamory? Or had I wanted him to fight for me, to remind me why I chose him in the first place, to make me feel desired again? I didn't know. I still don't know. I ran into Marcus 4 months after the divorce was finalized. He was at the grocery store, looking good in a way that made my chest hurt. Not dramatically different, just healthy, rested, content. "Hey," I said awkwardly, when our eyes met in the produce section. "Hey." He gave me a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "How are you?" "I'm okay. Good. You?" "Good, yeah. Really good, actually." There was an awkward pause. I wanted to ask if he was seeing anyone, if he was dating, if he'd tried that polyamory he'd mentioned, but I was afraid of the answer. "So," I said instead, "did you ever, try the whole poly thing, since you said you'd rather do it single?" He laughed, but it wasn't mean, just tired. "No. Turns out I'm pretty solidly monogamous. I just said that because I was hurt and angry." "Oh, yeah." He picked up a bag of apples, examining them with more attention than they deserved. "I'm actually seeing someone, just one person. Very traditional, very boring by your standards, probably." The word stung more than I expected. That's good. I'm happy for you." "Are you?" He looked at me then, really looked at me. "Are you happy? Did you find what you were looking for?" Had I? I'd been on dates with multiple people. I'd technically lived the poly lifestyle I'd claimed to want. I'd had the freedom and novelty and exploration I'd said I needed, and I'd been miserable the entire time. "I don't know," I admitted. "I thought I knew what I wanted, but maybe I was wrong." Maybe you were just bored, he said gently, and instead of working on our relationship, you decided to blow it up. Easier to start over than to fix what's broken, right? That's not what I was trying to do, wasn't it? He set down the apples and turned to face me fully. Be honest, were you actually interested in polyamory as a lifestyle? Or did you just want permission to check out of our marriage without officially leaving? I opened my mouth to argue, but the words died in my throat. Because maybe he was right. Maybe I hadn't wanted polyamory. I'd wanted an exit strategy, a way to explore other options while keeping Marcus as a safety net. I miss you, I said quietly. I miss you too, he said, and he sounded sad. I miss who we used to be. But that's gone. You made sure of that. We could try again. No, he said firmly. We can't, because I'll never trust that I'm enough for you. I'll always wonder when you're going to get bored again, when you're going to want something I can't give, and I can't live like that. He picked up his basket and gave me one last sad smile. Take care of yourself. I really do hope you find what you're looking for. Then he walked away, and I stood there in the produce section, fighting back tears, realizing too late what I'd thrown away. It's been 8 months now. Marcus is still with that woman he mentioned. I've seen them together once, from a distance. They were laughing, holding hands, looking at each other the way Marcus and I used to. I'm still technically exploring polyamory, though my heart isn't in it. I'm on the apps. I go on dates. I tell people I'm non-monogamous. But mostly, I just feel lost. My therapist says I need to figure out what I actually want instead of what I think I should want. That I got caught up in the idea of polyamory without considering whether it was right for me specifically, or whether I was just trying to solve the wrong problem. You said you were bored, she pointed out during our last session, but opening your marriage wouldn't have fixed boredom. It would have just added complexity to an already disconnected relationship. So what should I have done? I asked. Talk to your husband about being bored, suggested couples therapy, tried new things together, worked on rebuilding intimacy. She looked at me over her glasses. The hard work of actually fixing a relationship instead of looking for a shortcut. She was right. I knew she was right. But admitting that meant admitting I'd destroyed my marriage for nothing. That I'd lost Marcus because I was too lazy or too scared to do the real work. It meant admitting he was right when he said single life sounded better than what I was offering. Because what was I offering? A marriage where he had to share me with other people, where he was never quite enough, where his needs came second to my desire for novelty and freedom. When I frame it like that, I can't blame him for choosing himself, but that doesn't make it hurt any less. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd never read that article, if I'd never gotten curious about polyamory, never convinced myself that non-monogamy was the answer to our problems. Would Marcus and I still be together? Would we have found another way through our rut? Would we have been happy? Or would we have stayed stuck, gradually growing more distant until we were nothing but roommates sharing a space? I don't know. I'll never know. Because I chose to blow it all up instead of finding out. I told myself I was being brave, honest, authentic. I told myself I was fighting for what I needed, refusing to settle, demanding a relationship structure that honored all of me. But maybe I was just being selfish. Maybe I was prioritizing my wants over my commitment. Maybe I was looking for an excuse to have everything without having to choose anything. Marcus chose. When I forced him to pick between a poly marriage and single life, he chose single life. He chose himself, his values, his boundaries. He chose not to compromise on something fundamental to who he is. And I'm left wondering what I actually chose. Because I said I wanted polyamory, but I haven't embraced it. I said I wanted freedom, but I feel more trapped than ever. I said I wanted novelty and growth, but mostly I just feel empty. I wanted my husband to evolve with me, to grow beyond traditional structures, to embrace a more expansive vision of love. Instead, he evolved without me, and he's happier for it. I see his social media sometimes. I know I should unfollow him, but I can't quite bring myself to. He looks good, healthy, at peace. His new girlfriend posts photos of them hiking, cooking together, doing all the normal couple things we used to do. She looks at him the way I used to look at him, back before I decided monogamy was stifling and traditional marriage was boring, and I needed more than what we had. She looks at him like he's enough, and for her, he is. For me, he wasn't. Or I thought he wasn't. Or I convinced myself he wasn't, because I'd been reading too many articles about alternative relationship structures and forgot to appreciate what I actually had. I don't know which version is true. Maybe they're all true. Maybe I genuinely needed something Marcus couldn't give me, and we were always going to end up here. Maybe I just sabotaged something good because I was afraid of being settled. Either way, I'm here, and he's there, and we're both living with the consequences of my honesty. People ask me sometimes if I regret it, if I wish I'd never brought up polyamory, never rocked the boat, just stayed in my comfortable marriage and dealt with the boredom privately. The honest answer is complicated. I don't regret being honest about what I was feeling. I don't regret refusing to suffer in silence, to pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. But I regret how I did it. I regret not going to therapy first to figure out what I actually wanted. I regret not having smaller conversations before dropping the big one. I regret not considering Marcus's feelings, his needs, his boundaries before making demands. I regret treating our marriage like an experiment instead of a commitment, like something that could be radically restructured on my whim, rather than something that required both of our consent to change. Most of all, I regret not seeing what I had until it was gone. I regret taking Marcus for granted, assuming he'd always be there no matter what I asked of him. I regret not appreciating his love, his loyalty, his willingness to build a life with me. I regret learning the hard way that sometimes the grass isn't greener. Sometimes it's just different grass. And sometimes when you leave your yard to check out other lawns, you come back to find your yard has been claimed by someone else. Someone who appreciates it more than you did. Someone who thinks it's enough. The end. Have you ever suggested something to your partner that ended everything? Drop your city or country below.